Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about how to increase engagement and retention with actionable learning analytics. My name is Laddick, and I am from a company called OpenLMS. I am very excited to we have an extraordinary number of people who've registered to come and join us here for this conversation with my two, well, I guess they're above me here. I hope that you're seeing them the same way I am, Amy Tessitore and Elizabeth Dalton. Liz and Amy, how are you today? Liz, I always ask that of panelists, and then I forget that you're going to both answer at the same time. Liz, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Laddick, and
Fantastic.
I hope you are as well. I'm so excited to be talking with two of my favorite people about one of my favorite subjects.
Fantastic. And Amy, how are you?
I am also doing well and equally as excited to be here today to talk about a topic that I'm super passionate about. I know Elizabeth is super passionate about, but I think is something that's kind of shrouded in mystery sometimes. So I'm not sure everyone shares our excitement when we go places and we kind of nerd out over this topic, but I'm really glad to be here today to talk about it.
Super cool. I want to give you both, just a few minutes to actually introduce yourself and give a little bit of background about both IntelliBoard and about OpenLMS. But before we do that, I want to welcome everybody who is joining us. If you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, I'm old enough, you can see here, that I still get really fascinated. And I think it's super cool, the global audience that we pull from and that we're able to, have this real-time technology to talk to everyone. Do me a favor. Tell me where you are and tell me where you might be listening from right now. Are you in North America? Are you in Africa? Are you in Australasia right now? Are you in, Latin America like I am right now? I'm in Mexico City. I'd love for you to throw it in the comments there. And, it's on the right-hand side, or if you're on YouTube, it's on the right-hand side. If you're on LinkedIn, it's just below you there. But it's always great to know who's listening to us. And while you're doing that, I will invite Liz. Liz, tell us about who you are and just give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Well, I am learning and development analyst at IntelliBoard, which means I get to spend most of my time, following trends in the subject that I really care about, which is using data to improve the learning process for real human beings. So trying to follow all of the statistics and also all of the qualitative studies and best practice and how people use data to try to improve the learning process for both learners, instructors, advisors, everybody else. And my background is in educational research, obviously, but I've also taught at university. I've worked in corporate. I've taught preschool Chinese, not quite the K-12 market, but
as one does.
One does.
Fantastic. Awesome. Amy, I want to give you the same opportunity as well. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Amy Tessitore, and I'm the Global Manager for Product Adoption and Education at OpenLMS. Like Elizabeth, I come from a background that's kind of varied with different work in education fields. I worked in higher ed for a while. I also worked in K-12. I also did work in the preschool area for a while as well. And now I'm on the corporate side. I also am pursuing my doctorate currently in learning analytics in higher education, researching barriers to the adoption of learning analytics, as well as socio-demographic bias that can play into learning analytics, which I know is something that Liz and I have had many passionate conversations about because it's a kind of a unique area. My role here at OpenLMS is to lead a team who helps clients around the world learn more about our products, how they can leverage them to meet their institutional goals, but also how they can use various partner products, Elizabeth being her company being one of those products, to make data-driven decisions and really achieve the institutional outcomes that stakeholders are looking for.
Thank you so much to both of you. Just a reminder to everybody, my name's Ladek, and I am the principal of e-learning advocacy at OpenLMS as well. It's my job to bring events like this to you and bring amazing guests and experts like Amy and Liz to you as well. I just want to give a shout out to, honestly, this could be my favorite part. Right, we've got Lauren in Oklahoma City. We have Joseph in Baltimore, Maryland. We've got Dolores in North Carolina. We've got Toronto, Canada. We've got Australia. There you go. Somebody, an anonymous user from Australia. We've got Virginia. We've got Rhode Island. We've got Turkey, our Barbados. It's just absolutely amazing that, we're drawing this global audience together to talk about, a topic that can be complex, is very interesting, but is extremely important, especially in the age of AI, the age of data, and, where we're going as the education universe evolves and continues to unfold. So for everyone who's out there right now, thank you for your comments, but please do keep them coming. As we talk, as we go through our presentation, and I start asking questions about Liz and Amy, please put your comments put your questions and comments in the chat, because we do see them. We see them in real time, and I will be able to feed them up into Amy and Liz, and so we can get some real time answers for you as well. Liz, I want to start out with you today, and I'd love for you to just kind of set the stage, right? So, for those who are completely newbies, or, sort of people who maybe feel uncomfortable about talking about learning and analytics and those kinds, give us a framework to work with about what this is all about.
So when we talk about learning analytics, I think one of the things that we try to stress with our clients and people that we're talking with, and I do this when I'm just talking about research with people too, is that it's more than just reporting. So all of the LMS products and other educational technology products often have some kind of reporting built into them, and those serve certain needs. But learning analytics goes beyond just making lists of who's doing what, goes beyond just summarizing who's doing what, to comparing and helping people interpret those results, and ideally to even go beyond and try to predict outcomes based on the data and highlight things that people in the learning process need to know, whether they're learners or they're instructors, things that might get missed otherwise. So the example that I usually try to use is I've taught statistics both in person and online at the university level. And when I'm teaching in person, I can look around the room and I can see who's getting it. I can see who's kind of bored and who's just kind of getting the glazed, shocky sort of look that people tend to get when anyone is talking about statistics or mathematics. And I can reach out to those people specifically with an anecdote or an idea or something that helps bring them back into the conversation. When we're teaching remotely, we're challenged by doing this, not just because we're remote, but because we're often asynchronous, right? So our learners and our instructors might not be online at the same time. We don't see each other's real-time faces, body language, and that's where we can interpret the stream of data that these tools automatically produce and pull out insights that tell us as instructors how our learners are doing, and tell learners how their behavior might be optimized a little bit to help them be able to learn better. So that's what we talk about. We talk about a cycle of gathering the data, analyzing the data, using it to make predictions, to identify something that might need more investigation or intervention, and then tracking those interventions and rolling them back into the cycle of analyzing the data and the interventions, the predictions, identifying people who might need help or people who are doing things outstandingly well that we want to recognize, and rolling back into interventions and around. So it should be a cycle. Any tool that's being used for learning analytics should go beyond just listing data. It should be gathering things into this cycle that helps to drive interventions and success.
Thanks. Amy, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that Elizabeth hits on a really important point, which is that you have a lot of data in your LMS, but if you don't have a plan and you don't have a framework for what you're going to do with that data, it's really very similar to if you're going to make a pizza and you have ingredients all over the counter. If you you don't have a plan and you don't know how those things come together and how to cook those ingredients so that they come out with something that's baked that's useful to you, you really don't benefit from that data that's in your LMS, right? So having the data is one thing, and then being able to have an analytics program maybe tied to that that lets you do something with that data, pull it into insights, which are kind of like a recipe that says, we know if we have these data points, we bring them in, this is an insight that can be generated. And that insight is where the power really happens with all of that data. And so I think that was a great introduction, Elizabeth, to the why you need a framework. But also that there's so much data out there, and on its own, it's exactly what makes people lost. It's the numbers behind statistics. It's the numbers behind a computation, and people become very overwhelmed with that. So helping them create to leverage a framework to do something with that data is really super important when we talk about data analytics and learning analytics.
If I can hopefully not put you on the spot here, but just to follow up with that a little bit. So many of the people who are going to listen to this are the people who are on the stage, right? They are the instructors, they're the designers, they are individuals who are delivering learning, right? Either asynchronously or synchronously.
Mhm.
This is where we find that you get a little tight in the chest, and people get a little, it's like, wait, am I supposed to be a statistician as well as and am I
Right.
like talk me through and assuage some of that fear around, am I watching this data stream while I'm teaching, or like where, I'm going to leave it there. Talk me through that.
Yeah. So I think when you are using a good analytics software connected to something like your LMS, you're not watching a live stream of data. Instead, you are focused on the teaching and learning and the interactions and the connections with your students. And you're letting the LMS produce that data, and the analytics software pull that data in and actually do all of the work for you. So rather than watching this live stream of just raw data that really isn't something that you can do a lot with, instead, you're really focused on all of the things you need to be. And the system is putting together and bringing that data together. And it is designed, the analytic software is typically designed to be able to pull specific data points, knowing that those play an important role in a certain insight. So if what I'm wanting to look at is where do my student, when we talk about predictive analytics, for example, often we're predicting the likelihood of success within a course. And it's so much more than that, right? So like if you've taught for any period of time, you have the gut feeling, you say, something's going on here. And I'm noticing that this student is heading down a path, but I don't actually their grades aren't a significant enough change. I'm not tracking logins every day. There's so many pieces of information, but the software actually pulls all of those important pieces together and gives you that insight. And now you can make that actionable. And so I think that the thing to remember is that as long as it all starts with putting together a plan, right? Your plan for adopting your data analytics and your learning analytics adoption plan. But from there, your role is really to just focus heavily on making sure that the courses are well designed, that they're being delivered, you're creating those relationships, because that's your role. It's the role of the software to pull all of that together to provide you with the insight. And that's where I think we sometimes have the disconnect where people are like, there's all this information. I don't know what to do with any of this. And the answer is you don't have to manipulate it. You just have to know what it means when it comes back to you. And that really comes down to enablement and helping people to understand what an insight is, what it means to predict success, and how we should frame that for end users. That's always a thing, is
Sure, yeah.
how you frame that data for people when you're presenting it to them.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I want to call out, it's almost too perfect here. We have Dr. Nicole Letois. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce your family name there. I apologize. But she says the best way that they have found incorporating IntelliBoard data from Liz's company is to set time aside to engage in a protocol around a data set and making time every 3 to 4 weeks to make that happen. So it sounds like, again, it's, putting it in the process. We talk about this with accessibility. We talk about this with design, et cetera. But this is another one of those things where it's like, this just needs to be a part of your process in your institution or in your department. Liz, any final thoughts there before we kind of shuffle on?
Sure. And I think that the cadence of how often you take a look at the reporting or the insights depends on your role and what you're going to do with it. When I was teaching, I looked at a couple of reports every day that we now have available as part of the system that told me how for all the students in my course currently, how many of them had been active within the last week, had submitted something, had participated in a conversation, and how many I had responded to within that last week. So did I reply to their forum post? Did I give them a grade on an assignment? Did I send them a message? Mm-hmm. And that let me see if there was anybody who was kind of slipping away. Mm. And so I would actually check that nearly every day, because as an instructor, my job is to be in contact with my learners every day. And so that's how often the cadence is that works for me. Dr. Etoile is talking about something at a more leadership kind of a level, where they're looking at administering their curriculum or making changes about policy, and every 3 or 4 weeks is good for that. So the cadence will depend on how often you have to make decisions. And ideally, a good learning analytics system will be there for you. When it's time for you to make a decision about what to do next, the system should be there with all of the data processed according to your own needs at your fingertips. I just want to point out, Lodek, we've had this conversation before about different versions of success in education and how people have different priorities. So the other thing I would say is, when you're choosing a learning analytics system, think about what your own priorities are. Are you trying to help every student pass, or as much as possible be as successful as possible? Are you trying to protect the quality of the value of your A, your grade point average? Because those will require different things. Are you trying to help each learner identify their own goals and become lifelong learners and grow? Are you trying to help each learner become a leader and transform their role within their community? Those are all perfectly valid goals, and they're all measured and promoted in different ways using data, the same data, but consolidated and interpreted in different ways. So that's really important. And this speaks to what Amy was saying. You need to know what your goal is at your institution so that you can set up your learning analytics system to help you follow through with those goals, to help each person in your institution in their role follow through on those goals.
Fantastic. Amy, I want to take this again, sort of take this as a moment to come over to you to talk about, how can we look at combining a learning management system and an analytical tool to either, maybe not make those choices, because everyone's going to make the choices about what they're looking at, but to get reports that we need to, when we have made a goal, like to quickly and easily create that cadence around what we're looking at, et cetera. Like what's that combination look like? And before you answer, I want to encourage everyone, if you're listening right now, tell us in the comments right now, do you have an LMS that you're using? Is it connected to a data analytics system? Let us know what that combination is, because we want to understand, how we can, best provide you with the best information right now on this webinar. So Amy, over to you.
Yeah. So, the LMS collects so much data natively. Every click is a data point, whether we realize it or not. So every click on something is a data point. And that's true for both our learners, but also our faculty who are engaging in things and things like this. So there's so much information already, so much data already in the LMS. And again, on its own, not necessarily useful, but when we can use a data analytics, learning analytics software to bring those data points together, we can start to model, we can create images, we can paint a picture of what the student profile is. And what we mean by that is what students are best served by the type of curriculum that we offer, what supports are in place, which parts of what we do are really effective for learners, and are there things that we notice are troublesome for all learners, or are there certain behaviors that learners demonstrate that we know are often indicators of success or indicators of a need for more support. So really, the LMS on its own generates so much data for you. And there are other things too, like it's not just the LMS. You have some other external systems, maybe your student information system as well, and you start to pull data from multiple places to understand this. But the LMS, every click is a data point. And that data is just sort of stored there and sits there. And sometimes we look at different logs and we say, oh, nobody looked at this, or the student did or didn't turn this in on time. And in and of itself, that's just a minuscule moment in time that doesn't actually tell us anything about the whole picture. But having that software that can pull all of that data together, feed it into models and insights that give us actual usable data, usable information, actionable data, is really where the power comes from. Um, it is amazing to me how much data we can pull from the LMS just based off of how people are interacting with the LMS, the content inside, and then be able to really understand what all of that means. And one place that I think it's super important and it's very evident is if you're going through a major curricular change, being able to have the modeling and the insights pre-change and then post change really gives you an opportunity to evaluate on an ongoing real time basis how things are landing, how that curriculum is rolling out, where we might need to make changes. And that's because there's so much data inside the LMS. And having a program like an IntelliBoard program where you can actually do something with that data, that's how we really bring the power together and
Fantastic.
make
I
it
want to.
usable.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you there. I want to just give a quick thank you to Chris and Papsy and Bob and Charlie and Jacqueline, who've all sort of answered that question. I encourage everybody. Tell us, do you have an analytics and an LMS system that are connected right now, and tell us what those are. And if not, tell us why. Is it a budget decision? Is it we don't have the expertise in house? Is it what kind of friction is preventing you from having that? Amy, take us a little further. Excuse me, in that answer, because I could see, again, if I'm thinking from the professor instructor mind, am I being watched, right? Am I being graded on this as well? So like, who should have access to analytics? And then is there a greater policy out there about how we use these and when they're reviewed and those kinds of things? So it's many times we focus on the learner thing, but I could also see, hey, there's administrative pieces here. And like you said, hey, let's judge whether or not this new curriculum is working, et cetera. Walk us through that.
So in my opinion, everyone should have access to the analytics that pertain to their own interactions. Now, the caveat to that is just having access doesn't mean that you actually understand that or that it's usable to you. So while I think that, as a learner, I would have loved to have access to some of my analytics. And now as someone who works on the back end, I love to see those analytics and kind of see how changes in the courses that I put out impact my learners. I don't feel watched necessarily when I have access to my own analytics because now they're meaningful to me. I can see how the work that I put in directly impacts my learners, what's resonating well with them. And sometimes I go back through and say, you know what? Very clearly, I didn't expect people to have a great handle on that content because I felt very shaky teaching it the first time. And the analytics help to reinforce that for me. And I can say, okay, but when I did this other thing, that worked really well. So I'm going to build upon that. I think that everyone should absolutely have access to their own analytics, but they also need that framework. So that comes back to kind of the policy, like what do we do with this? Mm-hmm. Whenever we're going to roll out an analytics plan, we program and we're going to use analytics, we really need to start with our learning analytics plan. So that's going to be identifying our stakeholders, identifying our purpose and objectives, and those may be different per stakeholder. And then talking about, now we have the data, what is the plan for actioning that data? So for example, if I have predictive analytics that let me know when a student may be at high risk for withdrawal or failure, great. What are you going to do with that? That's meaningless if we don't do something. You're actually just you're killing their dreams by telling them like, you're probably going to fail and there's nothing we can do for you. So part of it is setting up that plan, using the framework ahead of time, having clear objectives and goals, and also really understanding that it's not just learner centric. So one thing that learning analytics is really helpful at is helping us to better scale our admissions criterion and the students that we are recruiting to come to our universities. Not every school or university is a good fit for every student. And if we are appealing to the wrong applicant pool, a pool who wouldn't benefit very much from how we do things, we can actually start to show that with learning analytics and better target students, understand the supports that they're going to need, make changes to our institutional resources, but also our recruiting policies as well, and how we're recruiting people in and what promises we're making to them. So I think that everyone should have access to their own analytics. I think that we need to determine access beyond that based off of what our institutional goals are or our stakeholder goals are for implementing that learning analytics program.
Thanks. Liz, I want to follow up with you there. Like, talk to me through challenges about taking this out at scale. If I'm thinking of, a schoolhouse, not so much of a problem. But if I'm thinking about a 100,000 person university with lots of different campuses and whatnot, there, we have a very different problem. Talk to me just a little bit about that and different roles and responsibilities around that.
I've sometimes said that the graveyard of half implemented learning analytics projects is vast. In a lot of universities in particular, somebody in the computer science department has a great idea and a couple of graduate students help to roll it out, and they do a pilot, and then those graduate students graduate and move on, and nobody knows how to run their code, and then it needs security patches. And even some very large consortia of very, very bright minds in the area of learning analytics have had trouble keeping these systems up and running. So the big problem is security. So we want to be able to roll out data and interpreted data, interpretations, custom tailored per role interpretations of the data right out to the learners, to the instructors. If you're in a K-12 environment, maybe to the parents, to an advising team, to curriculum managers, and everybody should be able to see just their own content. So the security has to be built into the model. And that's one of the things that can be a problem at scale. Of course, other problems are if you have a really large institution, you probably don't want to hammer your LMS with running all of these reports directly on the production server. So a system like IntelliBoard that has a built-in data warehouse that extracts your data during downtime, during a time when not so many learners and instructors are on your system trying to use it, and then runs the reports off of that system, that can help to minimize that impact. I want to speak to a question that somebody, Carver A., we have Open LMS and IntelliBoard. I would like to know more about which metrics are being used for retention. There's a ton of data. So we have a library report called Learner Metrics, and you can use any metrics that you think might have that relationship in your own data, but I will tell you from the research where the strongest kinds of predictors are of retention and success in learning. And one comes from the LMS and the other comes from another system, usually the SIS. So within the LMS, participation is definitely your top predictor. So does a learner not just lurk, but actually get involved, post to a forum beyond just, I like cats too, which is something I've had to tell my students, okay, that's great, but it doesn't count as your participation this week. Submit assignments, attempt quizzes, let your students attempt them multiple times so they're getting feedback. All of that counts very strongly. And then the other key predictor is past history is a predictor of future performance, their GPA or the equivalent thereof in your environment. And that's usually stored in the SIS. We have the ability to pull data elements from the LMS and from associated systems like the SIS into IntelliBoard, and that should be part of your learning analytics system. Now, on the one hand, students can affect their participation. On the other hand, once they have been in a system for a while, their GPA is what it is. And there may also be demographic factors that affect them, like socioeconomic status, whether they're first in family to go to university, or if they're in a K through 12 environment, whether they're on subsidized lunch. They can't affect those, but they can still be part of a prediction, and they can help alert other people in the system that here's a student who may need more support. So as Amy says, not every institution is right for every student, but in open access institutions where we welcome every student, it helps to know what their challenges are so we can be aware of those and be ready to offer assistance. And doing that at scale, you need very tight security, data controls, and you need systems that direct just the right information to the right people so people don't just drown in the data. They get a consolidated list of the insights that will be most helpful to them to help the learning process.
Thanks, Liv. I want to again sort of feed off of what you're talking about right there to take us to another place. And I want to ask this question to everybody who's listening. In your institution right now, talk to me or put in the comments about do you have siloed data? Do you find there's a lot of friction between being able to access data from somewhere? Like, could you go and understand, what learners are doing across all of the subjects that you're teaching, or that your university offers, or that your institution offers, et cetera? And then, back to you, Liz, talk to me about how do we overcome those issues of siloed data around access and those kinds of things? What are some of the tools or the best practices that you recommend around that?
So I see that Bob in the comments is pointing out FERPA. So that's a United States legislation that controls who has access to educational data. And then there's GDPR in the EU. There are privacy regulations all over the world. So helping our clients and OpenLMS clients stay in compliance and in ethical compliance with those principles of privacy, that's a struggle. So we're bringing in data from lots of different sources. We bring in data from the LMS, the SIS, web conferencing systems that may have their own details about how often, how long somebody stayed in a web conference, in a Zoom, in a StreamYard chat, wherever. Attendance tracking tools, messages sent out through Mongoose, which is a specific messaging system. So we can bring in data from all these different places. And the challenge is finding unique identifiers to tie those data points together. So if people log in as Zoom and they didn't log in through an LTI link from within OpenLMS, from within their LMS, they may be using a completely different email address, and it can be challenging to match those records up. And similarly, if we're bringing in OpenLMS data and we're also bringing data from, let's say, Illusion Banner or Illusion Colleague, we need a unique identifier that allows us to tie that data together. And if your system doesn't have something like that, if you don't have those crosslinks, it can be challenging for us to help you overcome those. But there are creative solutions. There are ways to import matching data sets. Maybe you've got some system that keeps a list of all of your user IDs in your LMS and all of your user IDs in your SIS. We can import that and use that to link things together. So there are things that we can do to help our clients.
Amy, I want to give you an opportunity to speak to that as well. Just sort of integration, as speak to it from maybe the OpenLMS side, and how what your recommendations would be for reducing some of that friction.
Yeah, I think again, first of all, identifying what data you need to pull in together, right? So you have LMS data, and as Elizabeth mentioned, you could have SIS, you could have data from your messaging system. The LMS isn't designed to pull all that into the LMS. The LMS is one data producer, and the others are also data producers. Now you are able to make some connections between the two, but ultimately you're trying to push that LMS data out into something. Sometimes people put it into an LRS and then they use that to aggregate all the data or whatever. But more often than not, you'd be better served by connecting to a learning analytics software that's designed to pull data in from different places versus trying to make the LMS the place, right? It's one piece of the data puzzle, and that information can absolutely go somewhere else to be combined with other data. So understanding the data that comes out of the different points is really the key into understanding whether or not you have siloed data or you just haven't put the right thing in place to bring the data together. Siloed data really often happens when we have reasons, or we have intentionally kept data in a certain spot and only granted access to certain people, as opposed to feeding it into something that can make a meaningful insight with it. If you start to think about, if you've ever had a job in corporate, you know what it means when people get siloed. They get very into their thing, they stay in their lane, and it's kind of an intention to not share elsewhere because you work on this thing. That same type of thing can happen with our data if we're not careful. But understanding that just because the systems aren't connected doesn't mean that there's an intentional siloing. That's actually just that we haven't put the right piece in place to bring everything together. And those pieces exist. We can absolutely use software that brings all the data points together so that we aren't looking at siloed data. Siloed data doesn't help us because everything is contextual, right? So Elizabeth was talking about if we have students who have different sociodemographic background, that information is not in an LMS. So we are missing a key component when doing predictive analytics if we are not bringing that all into a centralized software that is meant to bring those pieces together. So, yes.
Awesome. So Bob is putting in the comments right here is that, and let's
Mhm.
just have a follow-up question here. He's like, what I'm understanding is there's something that you can pull from 3 different systems like Canvas and Cengage and Zoom at the same time. The short answer, I believe, is yes, but Liz, let me give this to you.
Well, we definitely integrate with Canvas and Zoom already, and we are looking at Cengage. But in the meantime, we have what I call instant integration, where if you have a system that can extract some data to a CSV file or XLSX file and drop it to an SFTP folder, we can import it on a schedule. And as long as there is that identifier that we can use, which could be something like a user ID or an email address, as long as there's some unique identifier that we can use to tie the data together, we can then include that in any of the reports within the learning management system, including, and I know we're going to get to this in a little bit, our predictive learning analytics system, which uses machine learning in the background to do some fancy stuff. We have somebody asking about ERP, and I'm not sure which ERP you're talking about, but we integrate with Workday now. Or again, there's this instant integration kind of method where if you can extract data from some other system that we don't integrate with yet, we can pull that in. And we have a data structure that we've defined that makes it easy to add things in on the side, that makes it easy to ask queries that relate to learning, even if we've had to bring in some data from a bunch of different systems and tie them all together. So I think that's something to look for in any learning analytics solution. Where can you get data from? What kinds of data can you use to generate these insights that we've been talking about?
Thank you so much. And yet you have, I was wondering who is going to be the first person on this webinar to mention machine. You almost said AI. You almost did. But so I'll be the first ones to use those 2 little letters. It's the, it's been the talk of the town and the universe for, well over a year now. And we want to know how we're going to be using it. Because ultimately, when we think of learner analytics, in my mind, the promise has always been, hey, I'm going to be able to not only understand my learner better, but I'm going to be able to, see that a few hours or a few days or maybe a few weeks ahead in time and say, ooh, hey, like if maybe there's somebody we need to support better. Maybe this is somebody who is we always seem to focus on the at-risk learner, but I also love to say, wow, this is really a high performer, and maybe we need to think of a different curriculum outcome for them. Or hey, this is a particular group that seems to work really well together, and these kinds of things. So again, before I hand the mic over to my 2 experts here, I want to ask our audience here, in your institution right now, are there AI tools that you're using? And are those AI tools being used to understand learners better and actually create better learner outcomes? Please throw it in the comments there. We'd love to know what kinds of tools you're already using today in your institutions. But that said, so Liz, let's take us there. Like, give us an overview of what predictive analytics might look like and how machine learning and artificial intelligence plays into this.
So artificial intelligence is actually quite a large field. And the thing that we've been asked about the most lately, of course, is ChatGPT and large language models. That's one aspect of artificial intelligence, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But another aspect of artificial intelligence is what we call machine learning. So this is when, in the old days, we could make a report and we could manually construct a calculation that would look at these particular factors and predict, we think these are the things that relate to risk. Here's our prediction. And it was a rule-based prediction based on what we think we know about learning. And we were never sure we got the weights quite right. Well, now we have the ability to pull in the data from all of the systems that are connected and run them through a machine learning model for you. And this is something that you set up, and it happens not quite behind the scenes. We do a little bit of consulting and instruction to help you understand what this is going to do for you and what its limits are. But then once you set it up, you train your model, you check your model to make sure that it's accurate enough for you within what we explain, and then you leave it running. And every week it makes predictions based on how students are similar to students who have been successful before or who have not been successful before, using one of several different machine learning algorithms. And you don't need to know, does it matter the most if they have high attendance, or if they post a lot in the forums, or if they always do their quizzes on time? You don't need to know which of those things is the most important. The model determines that by looking at your actual history. So, Bob, that's exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about. That's exactly the kind of prediction that we're able to make. That said, people are asking us, well, what else are we going to do with AI? Like, there's more, right? There's all these fancy things that we keep seeing out there. I mean, it can make movies, it can write music. Well,
oh, somebody saw the Sora release. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So we are looking at those kinds of tools, but as I told someone else earlier today, we don't want to just sprinkle AI pixie dust all over our product and hope good things will happen. We have a very active research and development program looking at how to use AI well to solve the problems our clients actually have. So one of the problems that they have is finding the right report. We have a large library of over 100 reports. They're useful for different people in different situations. What if you could just type in your question and get a tested, accurate report designed for your user story? So that's the first kind of feature that we're going to be rolling out. Another feature that we are looking at is you get a dashboard. It's got some charts and some tabular reports, and you're not sure what it all means. Well, we could prefix above that a text interpretation where we use the AI to scan the data in the report and tell you what's significant about it. What data looks unusual in this report? What's worth your attention? And then eventually to proactively, you don't even have to look at the report every day. It'll notify you if things are not just going along smoothly and there's somebody who needs your attention. I'd like to talk just one more thing about predictive analytics. It doesn't have to be just learner is at risk or even learner is likely to go on and win a Nobel Prize. It can be the behavior of this teacher is such that it resembles teachers who've had lots of successful students or teachers who've had lots of struggling students. It can be the design of this course resembles courses which have had lots of successful students or lots of not successful students. Anything that you can pull into the data, you can make a prediction about. It all depends on what you are looking for. And we have consulting services available to help you build those kinds of models. I do have to say that students at risk is the most common request we get first. But
Sure.
there are more things we can do.
Amy, I want to give you the mic for a little while to talk about this as well. And also, if you wouldn't mind taking a stab at Scott Hardwick's question around how Moodle competencies and activity rubrics might be accessible in reports, especially through IntelliBoard or other reporting systems like that.
Yeah, so the competency frameworks, there's definitely within IntelliBoard, we have seen demoed many times, the ability to pull in data related to the competency frameworks. The rubrics piece is a little bit different. The way that rubrics are designed in Moodle is a little, typically what people are looking for there is I have a criterion in my rubric, which is something that I use as part of accreditation to show that my students are meeting a certain metric. That's often where that conversation comes from. It's where it came from when I asked, have approached this from being on the other side. So Moodle does allow you to report back out on rubrics in the sense that you can see overall student achievement. The place that we sometimes see a gap is that line by line. So the criterion by criterion reporting. But you are absolutely able to pull in data from the grades associated with rubrics, potentially the feedback you're leaving on these things, and the Moodle competency frameworks as well, to be able to understand what your competency-based education program looks like, how students are achieving, where we are seeing high achievement, where we are seeing low achievement. And then this goes right back to what Elizabeth just said, which is that predictive analytics isn't just about students, predicting students' propensity for success. It also helps us to understand where we might have gaps in our curriculum or where we're doing really well in our curriculum. And being able to pull in your competency framework data is a great way to evaluate that, because now you have a clear picture of, look, people are doing a great job at achieving competencies on the schedule that we kind of anticipated would happen, at the level of achievement we expected. until we hit this point. And here we're seeing this dip down kind of for everybody. So being able to pull that data in, and you absolutely can, helps to not just predict student success and be able to show, your accreditors that you're measuring all of these things, but it also helps you to very clearly identify where we either might not have enough content on a particular competency, or the delivery method for the content related to that competency isn't resonating well with our learners, or perhaps even we just have maybe the rubric needs to be rewritten for that particular competency. Maybe we're not evaluating the thing we think we're evaluating, right? So sometimes we have that little bit of disconnect where we're teaching the thing and then we're asking the questions, and then later we realize, oh, the question I asked actually wasn't targeting the objectives that I was trying to meet. So that's kind of addressing Scott's question there.
Thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
Amy, I want to give you another question as we're kind of coming up. We only have about 15 minutes left in this webinar. And so again, if you're in the comments with us now, or if you're listening live on LinkedIn or on YouTube, now's your opportunity. Now's your opportunity to put some questions in there for Liz or Amy. Anything that you'd like. If we can't answer them here, we'll definitely find somebody who can for you. But these two ladies, I'll tell you what, they kind of know everything. So at least about learning and analytics. So so please do put your questions in right now. And I'd especially like to know about, if you're in an institution right now and you are experiencing, critical failures or critical friction or, missed opportunities, throw those in the comments, because we'd like to hear about what are some of those gaps that need to be solved so that we can help you identify the solutions for you. And on that note, Amy, I'd love for you to start out by saying, or by answering, what are some outcome-based sort of examples that you've seen in your practice where you're getting buy-in, like for instance, from leadership, from instructors about, oh, hey, yeah, like, I knew analytics was possible, but I didn't realize it did this. Or, hey, we just really had this aha moment, and we've really been able to take some steps with curriculum or those kinds of things. Like, give us some of those.
Yeah, I think almost every analytics program that I have been involved in at any point during the implementation, almost always it begins with, we want to be able to predict whether a student will be successful or not. And that's great. It's a good place to start, because typically there's a lot of buy-in there. And once you have that and you say, yes, we can predict a student's likelihood of achievement, success, potential to withdraw from the class, but we also can predict which of the interventions that we have in place would be most successful for students, because we can continue to measure. And so that means that when we are sending students to tutoring, or we are saying, like, how do we help students? Now we can answer the question of how do we help students, because we have data that shows exactly what was helpful for students. And as you start to just unpeel that orange just a little bit, and you say, yes, we can predict this, and we can do this little thing too, which is going to make things easier for you. And we also start to say things like, all that time that you're putting into trying to develop things online, actually the data shows us that you don't need to use every activity type in your course. You could limit it to these 4 high power, high impact activity choices, and then pepper a little flavor here and there. But we can actually reduce the load on faculty as they're trying to utilize the learning management system, learn the learning management system, and provide them with real data that shows you don't have to do all of these things. You don't have to develop every activity type. In fact, if you do what you're doing and you pick 4 things, that will be highly successful. So what we basically do to get the buy-in is we start with where people think they need to measure things, and we build from there. And we say, yes, absolutely. If that's what your goal is, these are the things that we already have, the data we already have, and we can do it like this. The analytics software is able to pull all that together, and we'll have those insights. And then, did you know this? And then, did you know that? And ultimately, we want to make sure that you have more than enough time to get down to whatever your role is. So if you are doing student intervention, I want you're going to have all the data to do that. You don't have to go dig for the data. You don't have to do all of these things. And you're going to be able to have real-time data that shows you how effective those interventions are. And if you're a teacher, we can say, this data helps to show that these are really great instructional approaches to things. These things are very effective. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to narrow our enablement to things that we know work. And that makes the entire process of utilizing your technology much less overwhelming, because now you can create a scaffolded approach to things. And that really does help to buy long-term buy-in. And that's where, Elizabeth said, she can't tell you how many like half-baked learning analytics programs are out there. I would say I can 100% echo that. But those that have been successful started with a goal, and then they scaffolded and built out from there in ways that were impactful to their stakeholders. So sometimes we will see people wanting to they want all the data, they want all of the insights, but that's a lot of data, that's a lot of insights. And if we aren't targeting that to the needs of our stakeholders, we will absolutely not get buy-in, because that's not sustainable. And we don't have support for people that way. So I think, start with where people are, what they think they need at that moment. And then you just sort of build a little from there, and you make these little connections. And they don't need to be, super like grandstand events. I know just from working with people and adopting our platforms, off the cuff, sometimes you'll say, "Hey, did you know you could do this thing too?" And that's actually where people get buy-in. Those little like, "Did you know?" type of moments. And I think as long as you keep doing that and you keep making sure that people feel supported and you have the appropriate enablement, that's where you have that long-term buy-in.
Liz, I want to give you the opportunity to give us an aha moment or an example of an outcome that you've seen or you continue to see over there at IntelliBoard.
We've got a couple. We have a report that lets faculty see how much attention learners are paying to each element of their course, how often they visited it, how many times they participated. If it's a participatable activity with a URL, all they can do is visit it, how much time they spent on it, and if there was a grade, what they got. And you can break that down per learner, or you can see the averages or totals for all the learners. And that helps you see, I made this great video and nobody is looking at it. Or, oh, wow, this resource that I found, this open education resource that I found is really, everybody's looking at that. I need to go look at that source and see if I can find some more things like that, because that's really speaking to my students. We had a client that was trying to establish some standards around course design, and they used reporting just to kind of, as one of their first projects. They were just building reports with lists of all of their courses, and they were planning to look at things like average grades, and they saw that a whole group of instructors and instructional designers didn't understand the standards and weren't building the courses the way they thought that they were being built, and that was leading to some problems. So we've just had a number of different kinds of aha moments from, here are my learners who really aren't logging in. Here's the correlation between feedback from my instructors to success for my students. Here's how people are actually designing courses. Here's how people are actually using the LMS.
Fantastic. Amy Tessitore, Elizabeth Dalton, we have amazingly used up almost an entire hour of everyone's time here. I want to put just a notice out there. You can see at the bottom of the screen here, there's a little article that we've created for you about how to do learning analytics that will talk through many of the topics that we talked with today. I encourage everybody to, if you're either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, come over there and check out that article. We'd love to answer your questions. Amy and Liz, I want to sort of round out our conversation first by thanking everybody who joined us today. Dr. Nicole, Scott, Bob, Chris, everybody else in the world who's out there in Barbados, in Johannesburg, South Africa. Zaru, it's very nice to see you. But tell us, how do people take a next step with you? So, Amy, why don't you start? What would be the best way for people to take a next step and reach out?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me is probably to connect with me here on LinkedIn and send me a message. That is probably the easiest way. You can also email me at amy.tessitore@openlms.net. I would love to have a conversation with you, so you can reach out to me anytime, and we can continue a chat on this or anything else that you want to chat about.
Thanks. And Elizabeth, same question to you. How should people reach out to you?
People can reach out to me directly at elizabeth@intelliboard.net. But if you're interested in setting up a demo, or you'd like to see this set of tools or some of what we do with your own data, help desk at IntelliBoard.net will get you a very fast response, even if I'm underwater with programming tasks or on vacation. It can help. It can happen, but or at a conference or something like that.
Excellent.
So
Well, thank you so much, both of you. Yes, you are allowed to take a vacation. I am the grand poobah right now. I'm endorsing that. Go do that. Fantastic. Thank you so much to Amy. Thank you to Elizabeth. Thank you to everybody who have joined us today. Kirsten, I want to just acknowledge, yes, we're going to put the links both in YouTube and in LinkedIn as well, so that you can find those resources as well. But at this point now, I will wish you all a wonderful day. And thank you so much.
thanks, everyone.